Hi folks, welcome back to Backyard Aviary Adventures and join us for our 100th video. The last 100 videos have been a real roller coaster. From our beginnings, building an aviary in the backyard during lockdown, buying, breeding and caring for many species of cage birds and poultry, then to our adventures, travelling around the UK birding, initially sleeping in the back of our car and then eventually getting a van. We've travelled to many corners of the UK, searching for all types of birds. We've even been abroad, taking our adventures to Africa twice. The whole adventure has been an absolute blast, and we couldn't have done it without your continued support. We've done photography and big day challenges, succeeded and failed in finding some really rare birds, and although we've seen many species of birds, we can't include them all in this video. So we've just picked the rarest ones. Join us as we look through the rarest birds from our last 100 videos. Enjoy and look out for the megas. A mega is a term for a bird that's very rare in the country. I'm not sure who it was coined by, but it's used a lot in the birding community. So let's start with one. Here is a juvenile bearded vulture. This one we saw in Derbyshire in August 2020. This enormous bird usually makes its home in the Alps and Pyrenees mountains, so it was amazing to see in Derbyshire. The next bird, another mega, is an elegant tern. This bird generally breeds on the Pacific side of North and South America, so seeing it at Kemlin Bay and Anglesey was amazing. Next on the list is another American bird, a pectoral sandpiper. This is not a mega, but it's certainly a great bird to see, and we saw it at Burton Mere on the Wirral. Carrying on with the American birds, here's an American golden plover. I believe this may be a juvenile. This was seen again on the Wirral, but this time at Hoylake Shore. And back to Burton Mere wetlands, where this amazing Wilson's phalarope showed up. This bird was very confiding and came quite close to the hide, spinning and feeding in front of us. What a bird. Now for something that's a reasonably regular winter visitor to the UK, although I'd never seen one before this one. This beautiful Iceland gull showed up near Conway in North Wales. Now back to the American birds and the megas. This is a bird we went to try and see twice. The first time we didn't see it. The second time we got it. It's a belted kingfisher from America. This bird frequented Roach Bridge in Lancashire near Preston. The views weren't the best, but it was a stunning bird to see. And another mega. This takes one of the prizes for birds at a far distance. This is a honey buzzard. Moving on to a bird that I think may be taken over the UK slowly, as there's been plenty seen this year. That was the glossy ibis, which we saw at a Yorkshire Wildlife Trust reserve, and we even had the hide to ourselves. I'm really hoping to see more of this species in our future videos. Now for another mega. This is a black tern, but not a European one. This is an American black tern. This is a bird that's been returning to Long Nanny in Northumberland for the last few breeding seasons, and we were lucky enough to briefly catch it. Excellent. The next bird, again a mega, is a very special one. It's Albie, the black-browed albatross that usually lives in the southern oceans, which could be the only one of its type in the northern hemisphere. Returned for a few breeding seasons to the gannet colony at RSPB Bempton Cliffs. We visited and saw it on 2 occasions. What an absolutely stunning bird. The next species, although not amazingly rare, is a beautiful European bird called a bee-eater. These birds on the video nested in Trimmingham in Norfolk. They had a successful nest last year and returned this year, but unfortunately this time weren't successful. The next bird, another European bird, is the hoopoe. This species is unmistakable with its long curved beak, crest and stripy wings, and this particular one was found in a horse paddock in Hinksworth in Hertfordshire. Now it's time for another mega, and back to the east coast of Yorkshire at Bempton Cliffs RSPB Reserve. A red-tailed or Turkestan shrike which stuck around for a few weeks in a farm next to Bempton Cliffs Reserve. This is one of only a handful of these birds that have ever been seen in the UK, so it was one of my favourites. And not only that, we had great views. And carrying on with the shrike theme, this isn't a mega rare bird at all, but it was the first one that I'd seen. This young red-backed shrike turned up in Shropshire at Wixall Moss Nature Reserve, which is only about an hour from where we live. Our next species is another one that's trying to colonise the UK, with increasing amount of breeding taking place. This bird you can see on the film was at Potterick Carr Nature Reserve. Well, last year they successfully bred, bringing up a couple of chicks. Moving back to the east coast, this is another bird we saw at Spurn. This is a citrine wagtail. It's a young one that was spotted and viewed by many birders in a field feeding with pied wagtail. Remaining on the east coast, this time at Flamborough, and starting with a couple of warblers. Here is a greenish warbler, a visitor from northeastern Europe, a small but very pretty looking warbler, but unfortunately not an easy one to get footage of, like most warblers. The next, back at Spurn, was a yellow-browed warbler. These are quite regular at certain times of the year, but again not an easy bird to get a photograph or video of. Staying in the Spurn area, these two phalaropes we saw on the same trip. First one being the red-necked phalarope. This species does breed in the UK in the Outer Hebrides, but are only generally seen in the rest of the UK in spring or autumn, so are generally in winter plumage. This wasn't the only phalarope. Here's the grey phalarope. We saw this at the Canal Scrape in Spurn. It was an extremely confiding bird and not one we'd planned to see. It just kind of turned up, so it was a happy surprise. It was seen by many people and was one of the busiest hides I've ever been in. Back to Kilnsea wetlands and the Caspian gull. This gull was a pain. It kept hiding behind a goose, eventually coming out and standing with a couple of herring gulls and black-backed gulls. It was a young bird and we needed help to identify it, but a great bird nevertheless. Back to the Canal Scrape side and a Temminck stint, which had showed up earlier in the day at Kilnsea wetlands and then relocated. We'd been for a walk and came back and it showed up just near where we'd parked. So great timing and a super bird. Now it's time to go back to warblers again, and this again at Kilnsea wetlands, a wonderful barred warbler. This bird had showed up earlier in the day and a lot of birders were there and they'd lost it. In a strange turn of events, I spotted it flying from one bush to another, so was able to point it out to the other birders. It stayed in the bush for a while and then came out and sat for a while, looking like it was sunbathing in the sun. What an ace bird. Now, away from the east coast, down south for a Hume's leaf warbler. I apologise for the lack of footage of this bird. It was quite flitty, but it came very close. What a confiding little warbler, and one of my favourites I've ever seen. Now to a bird that comes to the UK some winters in eruptions. This is the waxwing. When berries run out in Siberia and Scandinavia, they keep moving west looking for food, and occasionally they come in groups to the UK. This was a group that was in the middle of a housing estate in Yorkshire. They're one of my favourite birds and a super thing to behold. The next bird is some very poor footage of a shorelark we saw in Norfolk. It was a really cold day. We went down to the beach. You can even see the frost on the ground, but it was a really cool bird nevertheless. Our next species we went to Somerset for. This was a rosy starling, although a youngster, that was in a small residential area behind some industrial units. It wasn't there when we arrived, but with the help of some other birders, they helped point it out when it did turn up. Staying in Somerset and now onto a few ducks. This American widgeon, which tried to avoid us, sitting right in the corner of a lake. We looked out from a hide at Shapwick Heath Nature Reserve. We didn't see it, so I took a walk and eventually found it, hiding behind some reeds. A very pretty duck and a visitor from America. The next duck was in Norfolk and it was a lesser scaup. This was a female bird. The Following the species we saw at a distance. This was in Staffordshire at Aqualate Mere, a great nature reserve. This was a ferruginous duck. Now moving on to my favourite gull species so far, and this was the most confiding gull I've ever come across. It was a Sabine's gull. These Arctic Circle gulls are seen in the UK, but are usually viewed from boats or from the coast flying past. This one had come into rest near a beach and got really close. It didn't seem at all bothered by the birders, so I was able to get excellent footage. I felt really privileged to get this close to such a beautiful gull. It was a really memorable moment. The next two birds are divers, the first being a great northern diver. This one was in a very icy winter pond in Cheshire. We had to drive through snow to get it, but it was great to see. The next being a red-throated diver, which is at Gresford Flash, about 20 minutes from where we live. Now on to sea ducks. This is some of my favourite footage of both the surf and the velvet scoter in the same video. This was at Llandulus near Conway, North Wales. What a super sight. Now back to one little warbler. This is a Pallas's warbler, and some horrendous footage I got in Durham on the northeast coast. It took some searching to find, and we saw many other birds while we were looking for it, but eventually it showed up. I went the next day to try and get better footage, but couldn't. Now onto some ducks. The first being an American duck, the ringneck duck. Sightings in the UK have become increasingly numerous, with us now seeing two. The first on the video being a female and the second being a male that was molting. I'm hoping with the amount of birds that turn up in the UK we might get some breeding soon, fingers crossed. Now let's get back to megas. This bird was stunning. It was a Baikal teal. These birds live in eastern Siberia, so seeing one in the UK was a real privilege. This bird was on the coast in North Wales, not too far from where we live, so very convenient. Unfortunately it was a distance and the weather wasn't great, so the video's pretty shaky, but you can see it's an adult bird sporting a really stunning plumage. What a brilliant sighting. The next duck, a male spew, was seen briefly in Cheshire at Lapwing Hall Lake. Now on to another bird that we saw near Manchester, which was an alpine swift. We had an influx of these birds this spring and we were able to catch up with this one. It was amazing, really cool bird to see. Now back to some American birds, the first being a long-billed dowitcher, or dorwitcher, I don't know. American folk, please correct me. This one was seen at Burton Mere Wetlands, which is our local RSPB nature reserve. It was hanging around with some godwits and some dunlin. What a stunning bird, and it got really close too. Excellent. The next American bird is a mega. This is a white-crowned sparrow, which spent a week or so in East Sussex at a place called Seaford. It was in a little bit of vegetation by the sea and it came out to feed quite often. There was a lot of birders there, but we were able to get a little bit of footage. Now onto another bird that I think will start taking over the UK soon, which is a black-crowned night heron. There were 3 of these species at Watermead Country Park near Leicester. They were at the opposite side of the water, so it was difficult to get great footage, but this is a great reserve and I recommend for anyone to visit it if they're in the area. Now back to water birds, and American ones too. The first being a hooded merganser that was seen at Winfell Tarn in Cumbria. This was a small kind of farm lake, so it was lovely to see this bird in this kind of setting. It was brilliant and we were the only ones there. Moving on to a blue-winged teal that was sighted in South Lincolnshire. We went to have a look at this. It took a while to find it, but it was roosting on the far side of a small pool. Eventually it got up and had a wander around so we could get a reasonable view. What a great bird. Back to the east coast and to Spurn. Here was a great snipe. This bird showed up when we were on a family holiday, so we thought it would be good to have a look. When we arrived at the warren where it had been seen, there were plenty of other birders to help us out find it, as it was pretty camouflaged, ducking in and out of some long grass. eventually coming into sight. Now back to Cumbria for the next bird, and a common rose finch. This turned up near a wildlife trust garden and stuck around for a couple of weeks. It was quite a showy bird, often perching out in the open singing. It was a pretty bird with a lovely song. Now to Cambridgeshire, where we saw a white stork. This is a reasonably imposing bird, with it being quite large. It was on some floodwaters behind an industrial estate and stuck around there for quite a few weeks. Awesome. The next bird is actually a British breeding bird, but I thought I'd include it anyway because it's so amazing to see. This is a white-tailed eagle. We saw this perching in a tree at a distance on the island of Mull, which is one of their strongholds in the UK. These amazing birds were once native but became extinct and were reintroduced. Stunning. The last and final bird, I thought I'd make a mega. This is a recent bird we've seen. It's a Forster's tern, another visitor from America. This particular one has been turning up all summer on the south coast in Dorset. We went once to try and find it on Brownsea Island and failed. This time we got it at Arm Nature Reserve, which is nearby. After standing with a handful of birders for a while, I spotted it and we watched it for a while. What a great bird, and what a great end to our first 100 videos. Thanks so much for watching, and please keep with us for the next 100.